Welcome to the Matriarch Podcast, a sisterhood of legendary Black queens in the making, speaking about real issues, questions, thoughts, ideas, lessons, and cultivating future experiences. So let's get our crowns, wine, slippers, and start the conversation. In this episode, you will hear an interview with me, your host, Ashley Washington, during Black History Month of this year. You'll hear about my background, being raised around multi-generations of great women, what it was and is to be a Black woman in corporate, and how to overcome stigmas of Black women in the workplace. It is important that we maintain a safe space for Black women to air their experiences and concerns, but also inform others of how to help uplift Black women in corporate. I hope you enjoy this episode of honesty and the tips we can share with others to make the Black experience better over time. Enjoy.
Awesome. So I do love that you haven't been here a full year yet. I feel like we're still getting you while you're fresh with EVERSANA Intouch. How has the experience been so far?
It's been great. I'm learning a lot. I've come from multiple industries, everything from design, real estate, automotive. It's really been an honor to apply my level of expertise in marketing here at EVERSANA and learning a lot about pharma. So it's super exciting.
That is, and you've joined us at a really exciting time with the acquisition and all of the fun migrations that we've all been doing. We're at like a really pivotal moment here for the agency, so that's amazing that you get to be a part of it as well.
Absolutely, and I think I know we just had our CEO update, but adaptability is key. And it's funny that he mentioned that because one of my favorite animals, people pick. Lions for courage and things of that nature. And I always choose a frog because it's one of the most adaptable creatures that exist. They adapt to a lot of temperatures and things of that nature. So it's just really, really important, that adaptability factor. So I really appreciate them mentioning that earlier.
I love that. That is something that I did not have on my list to talk to you about. So I'm glad that I got to hear a little bit about your favorite animal, because I think that's very key. I am a tiger. A tiger is my spirit animal. And at least that's what I like to tell myself.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we're going to dive back to a little bit further back. So let's go back in time and hear a little bit about your background. I loved that I got a chance to speak with you earlier this month, and I got to hear a little bit of your story, but I want to share more of that. To hear about sort of like foundations, because as we know, foundation is everything, where you grew up, your family, the dynamics there. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I was actually born and raised in Gastonia, North Carolina. It's a beautiful place. At the time that I was being raised there in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of it was industrial. So there were a lot of industrial mills there. You can go and tour there in Gastonia if you want to. However, when the 90s came and we were moving factories and we were going to more globalization, Gastonia was largely impacted. So that's just, I'll give you the short of it, but I had a lot of my family members that were impacted, whether it was John Deere, Wicks, Family Mills, Freightliner, things of that nature. So that definitely had an impact. As far as the foundation is concerned, I was very, very blessed to be raised in around multi-generational family members. So I had my maternal and fraternal grandmothers on both sides, both grandmother and great grandmother. So they were able to pour into me so very much, because one of my grandmothers, her grandmother, was actually the first out of slavery. And so hearing those, details of, what the struggles were, but how they still found happiness, and being raised on a farm and crop farming, and, what type of adversities they kind of overcame. those are stories that were poured into me that I will definitely carry on to my generation, my girls. And so it's very not only interesting to hear, but it's interesting to see how far we've come from a family perspective, but also from a national view. So one of the things that I definitely want to call out is that Black women in particular were not, they were not to be educated. They were not to be, really considered as, everyday part of life. They came home, they did work, they took care of other people's children, and that was just kind of what they did. So my grandmothers, for them to be able to basically say, hey, I want to step out of this, I want to get an education. Even in North Carolina, at the time that they were being raised, and this is, kind of 40s, 30s, 40s, it was very interesting that a lot of women just in general weren't getting educated. But my two great grandmothers, they were adamant about getting educated. And so they went all the way to high school, which was basically unheard of. You basically dropped out ninth grade and you got on the farm and you worked for the crop farming for your family. And that's how you were able to stay on the farm, have your living expenses, things of that nature. And everything cycled back into that crop farming system. And so it's interesting to carry over that usefulness and sort of forward thinking for getting off of the farm, right? Because it's important for people to want better. Well, people want better, but it's important that my grandmothers instilled in us to make sure you get an education, because that is the way out and upward movement to middle class.
Yeah, that's honestly incredible that you had that many generations worth of knowledge and stories to pull from, because I think that that's something that a lot of people, they don't have at least that many generations. And especially, for other communities who haven't been as impacted as much, people who, haven't faced as much adversity in the past. I mean, to hear those stories passed down, it's so important. And I'm really honestly so glad that you've been able to have that experience.
For sure. It's been a very, very large blessing. My father's grandmother, actually, she was actually part of a sit-in at Tony's Ice Cream in Gastonia. And while it was very difficult for her, her sharing that with me, and sorry, I'm getting a little emotional about it, but her sharing that with me and her story, because when I was little, you don't think about, oh, we're going to an ice cream shop. You see the two fountains beside each other, but you don't necessarily know, like, that she was told to go to a different fountain, right? But it's there. And then they were only to eat in the back. So those impacts and the way that we can move forward is something that is truly, truly amazing. And it's important that we recognize, I know this is Black History Month, but honestly, it's American history that we should carry through 365.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I also think too, again, as I mentioned, with like, there's been so much change, we still have so far to go, but there has been so much change. And I think that even with, on like a much less important note, but like with technology, like the type of technology that we've had to grow up with and how radically it's changed over time. And I mean, just looking back at the things that your grandmothers and great grandmothers had to go through, I mean, like to now, that's just such a huge, it's a leap. And it's really incredible that you've had that. How do you think that their experiences compare to your own in today's world? Because like I said, we still have far to go, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I mean, you had people doing sit-ins back in your family, but now what about now? Like, tell me about that.
So it's really interesting that you asked that question, right? Because I think of my grandmother's grandmother, the first out of slavery for her generation, and how she had to overcome that. And then I think about my grandmother's how she had to basically say, okay, well, I'm going to go to high school. Well, she encouraged all three of her daughters to go to college, and every single last one of them did, one of them being my mother. And so with that, all of them went into some type of biochemistry or oncology. And so my mother is a chemist, and she poured into me the periodic table at the age of 9. And so what was important about that moment, I didn't realize it then, is that understanding not only just the value of education, but how you can help others. I think there is a continued narrative throughout generations that I've gone through where they have a continued narrative of helping others, giving back, whether it be your community, your job, what have you. And while there were, differences, and by differences, I mean there were hurdles that they had to overcome that others may not have, just being Black women, being the first in the space, not being heard, not being seen, and then just given sort of just the piddling work, if you will. Not that you don't grow in every job, but it's interesting to see how each generation just continually improves. And I will definitely pour that into my girls, their stories, and things of that nature. But I think it's very important that we capture those moments, because each person walking around is a library of information. And so to make sure that we not only capture those moments, but also just with the technology that we have, just make sure that we are documenting, right? Our generation is considered the documentary generation. And so I think it's going to be very important, but also when we look back at this time, at this moment in time, it's going to be really important that we say, okay, this is where this generation started. We had dial-up, we had computers in our homes for the first time, we had emails, and now we're talking about artificial intelligence and how we can pour into that, right? So seeing, a picture of my grandmother on a mule to me working virtually, and learning more about capabilities of AI just is really, it speaks volumes, not only about our sort of household and upbringing, but just where we are as a country and as a people. That is really, really something that I look forward to being older and looking back and seeing where we came from.
Well, I love how you mentioned, again, like with the generations, about how each generation goes through so much change. And I also love how you mentioned the importance of giving back through each generation. In some ways, you're giving back to the future that's upcoming, the upcoming generation. What you give back today is going to impact them so much more, that as time moves on. So I think that that's a really wonderful way of focusing and framing that narrative. So first of all, the periodic table, I could not tell you two things about the periodic table. So that's already very impressive, but I would love to talk about that. Like you mentioned that your mom has chemistry background and your dad's there was a mechanic. He was a mechanic, I believe.
Yes.
So I'd
I'm
love to know the
sorry.
path. No, you're fine. I just wanted to know the path of what got you here with us at EVERSANA Intouch with those two backgrounds.
Oh yeah, for sure. So my dad was a tool and die maker. He actually encouraged me to draw very early on. So I was doing isometric viewings even before high school. And so I was able to draw, draft is I don't know if people draft anymore actually, but with those isometric viewings, you can understand mechanics and how to make things, and just being able to sort of be hands-on. I was able to kind of be left brain, right brain in my household and have that upbringing, which was really, really a nice mix. I was able to, not only see things, but also take a systematic approach when necessary. So it's really been helpful in my career. I've always been drawn to arts. And so with that, I actually studied interior design, and then architecture later on. And then I was actually with a company called Quality Wall Beds in St. Petersburg, Florida. And they said, hey, Ashley, we love that you are going to these homes and that you are, giving design guidance. Why don't you take a whirl at our marketing? And so I did that, and my life was changed forever. So with that, I went into marketing, and I have just been going industry to industry, right? Because your audience is always the key component of what it is you should be pulling to draw them in, or whatever it is you need that audience to do from a marketing perspective. So they were able to pour into me that left brain, right brain, and I've gone through a slew of industries, but it's really, really resonated with me that no matter where I go, I carry that opportunity of learning, and development.
Yeah, that's amazing. I also know you mentioned something to me when we spoke earlier in the month about being creating sort of your own agency and being a staying at home mom as
Yes,
well.
yes.
Tell us about that. I mean, as if
So,
knowing the periodic table wasn't already impressive enough and all the other things.
yeah. So actually, prior to starting my own agency, I was actually with Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina. And so with that, I had my first child, and she was unfortunately diagnosed with neuroblastoma. So she was diagnosed at 3.5 months, and, the job's got to go to the side, right? So while in her care, or taking care of her, it was very important not only to become an advocate for children, not only suffering from neuroblastoma, but we also do Ryan's Run with St. Jude. But as I had progressed, as she was getting better, I was just basically kind of like, I really have an itch to keep going, to keep marketing. And the need just wasn't out, or the how can I say this? The ability, working from home was still a little bit more foreign. I know that sounds crazy, being just 4 years or 5 years ago almost. But, it's just really interesting how our workforce has changed to now accommodate. So after that, I had gotten pregnant with my second daughter, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to start my own agency. And so with that, I was able to market, also help with logistics, and just business development, and go from there. And then after that, I soon joined here to kind of narrow my focus on just the marketing piece.
Wow. I do have to ask, the first daughter, cancer-free at this
She
point, or
is. She is. She's
amazing?
cancer free as of October of 2019. It is such a blessing for us. So
That's
yeah,
amazing. All right. Well, I love that. I'm glad to know that throughout all of that, we still had that outcome.
absolutely. And pharma's where it's at. So it has just been a blessing to come and work for an agency that is helping others.
Yep.
Again, just that give back generation to generation. I just want to make sure that that is carried through.
Yeah. The work that we do matters. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
It seems like you got a lot of care and support from your parents, especially with like attention to the goals and your career path and everything. So how can we best empower and support other Black women and young girls as like in regards to their personal and professional development?
Yeah, so that is a great question. So I paused because we actually, while I had my own agency, I had worked or helped with a nonprofit that was coding to help coding and development and web development for minorities, particularly Black children. And so they would go out to these rural areas, partner with McDonald's, and they would teach them coding. So that is definitely a way that we can pour back into our communities. However, there are just a plethora of give back groups and community groups. We have one here in North Carolina, Google Fiber, who continually gives back. Cisco gives back. And so making sure that we partner. I know I'm talking more so about STEM, but it's important that we pour into Black children that have those disparities more so than other groups. Because the disparity gap widens over time. If you go back and you look at the 60s, for those that were able to get the GI Bill, and those that were Black males that were not able to get the GI Bill. Well, there's a generational wealth gap that exists there. And then those that weren't able to, whether it be purchase a house, go back to school, that disparity still remains as it did in that time, but you also have to apply that exponentially over time. So that's why I'm just kind of for STEM, because it catapults people to a place that catches them up very quickly. So
That's great. Yeah, I agree. That was a really eye-opening thing to me. Like, and we talk about systemic and, generational gaps that occur. And that's something that definitely is still, even though it feels like it was long ago, it's still very fresh for us within this country. And I mean, even just talking with you about the generational gap and hearing that, the stories that you heard, I mean, it's still pretty fresh and we're living with a lot of the results of that still. So it's important that we empower and lift up people who are in minority groups who may not have the opportunities that other people have.
For sure.
So we know that challenges are inevitable for, mostly everybody. Everybody experiences challenges and adversity at some point in their lives. But we know that, with systemic barriers, Black people and other marginalized groups can face more than those who belong to do not belong to those communities. Have you faced any specific challenges that you feel comfortable sharing, like on your wild career path that you had?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to answer this question, but I have to give a little bit of background first. So as I was being raised, my mom felt it important that I go to white predominantly schools. And to her, based upon her generation, that meant that white schools were the best. They got the books that they needed. They got the resources that they needed, so on and so forth. Not that that speaks for every school. However, it's more often true than not. And so her sending me off to white predominantly schools, was I able to get educated? Absolutely. But there's another dynamic that goes beyond education, right? There is a cultural advantage that you gain in working with others that are different from you. So understanding those nuance of culture, being aware of your surroundings at all times is something that I definitely had to be aware of very early on. And in the Black community, we call that code switching. So when you're in a certain space, you culturally refrain from certain things that you say. And I know this is a really hot topic, so I don't know if we'll get comments in the chat. But the sort of idea around that is code switching still necessary, right? And that's going to go from generation to generation, but also from place to place, right? Some places are more progressive than others. However, understanding that and going along in my career and sort of trying to get more towards leadership, entrepreneurship, and understanding that need I see is still being there. However, when I didn't code switch or what have you, I was taken more casually. Even though I'm the same person, same knowledge, you don't want to be seen as being passive or not taken as serious. So with that, I definitely always try to keep in mind, just kind of, okay, this is the audience, still getting back to that audience. This is who I'm speaking to. How can I get across a message that is first relatable, understandable, and just really having a high level of emotional intelligence. However, unfortunately, you do run into people getting promoted over you. I've trained my own boss probably 3 times now. And it's hard. You go home, you talk about it. You talk about it within your groups, your communities, and those safe spaces. But it is difficult to be passed over time and time again. But my mom gave me full and fair warning, as did my grandmothers. So It's just something that we work through. But I think it's an important call out that we start to look at things from whether it be in HR or other places. What is the true worth that this person is bringing to the table? Oftentimes you'll hear, oh, well, and I've heard this in HR conversations, which is, I don't want the quality to be diminished when we get in other groups. And so knowing that that's a part of the conversation, it's just a different way of thinking. And I want people to leave here basically with, if you are considering hiring someone that looks different from you, speaks differently than you do, just think everyone has perspective. And what gets that person here may diversify even your train of thought. And I think that that is really, really important, that we all feed from one another. So that, yeah. So I hope that answers your question, but I had to
no,
give history.
that was fascinating, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. I don't think that I've ever even heard the term code switching, but I totally visualize it and can understand what you're talking about now. I can see that. And I also think what you ended on, I think that's really important from a marketing standpoint, because at the end of the day, we market to so many people, again, who you said have so many different lives and stories, and there's a wealth of knowledge and information and past experience. And so if we're only hiring or only engaging with one type of audience, is that really helping anybody in the long run? I mean, I think that that's really important for us to know as an agency and people dealing in marketing.
For sure. Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head with that, because there are so many people that we're missing and not catching, whether it be authenticity, lexicon, things of that nature. So we're here to solve. So
yeah. And representation is definitely very important. Representation matters. That's what we've been saying for years, and we see the results of it. We've seen the viral videos, but then we've also just seen the numbers and the interest from people. So I think that that's really important.
absolutely.
So this is, another topic that we talked about a little bit earlier, and it's something that I threw in our document to talk about. So, I had a friend way back who at a part-time job said that she was tired of people projecting the tone of the angry Black woman onto her emails. So how do we dismantle that societal and cultural bias that can limit Black women? Because I have heard that not only from her, but I've heard it from other people as well. So clearly there's a trend going on here. And I think that we should talk about it.
Oh my gosh, this is such a hot topic. I will say that I first came across this and made a decision at the age of 8 to be proactive about this very topic. I know that sounds very young. However, I do live in the South, and so I was called the N-word at the age of 8 and was basically told that I would be nothing and so on and so forth. So having that attachment or stigma that is attached to you, your parents, your grandmothers, is it does follow you. And I took on this approach at the age of 8 to basically say, okay, I'm just a happy-go-lucky person. That's just my personality, and I was very blessed with that. However, if day in, day out, you are just trampled upon, it's difficult to come in and be positive all the time. It is exhausting. And I think we need to first acknowledge where people are coming from, right? Secondly, I think it's really important that we, first of all, stop stating that the angry Black woman is ever present, and basically saying that, okay, why am I thinking of this person in this way? What is it? Do they deserve to be angry in this moment? And so understanding that point of view, I think, is really, really important, first and foremost. But have I fought this? Yes, absolutely. If I am not pleasant at all times, if my tone is out of sort, if things that I really, really have to pick up on in order not to come across in that way. And it's unfortunate, but it's the life that I walk in. And so it does follow Black women. And I definitely am I'm sorry that your friend had to go through that, but I'm so glad she put it on your radar for you to, whether it be this conversation or carry with you in other conversations and or forums, because it's really, really important that we talk about this and not carry that on.
I agree. And thank you for sharing your experience. I'm sorry that you had that happen to you when you were that young. I can't even imagine. So yes, I'm very sorry. Well then, to go on top of the tone and everything like that, how can we uplift the voices and perspectives of Black women in the workforce?
I will say that Black women are the most thoughtful, brave, and encouraging that I have ever seen, not only from my generations, but also in other women that I meet. A lot of times they take what they have and they make a charcuterie board, for example. You know what I mean? They're taking a little bit of this, taking a little bit of that, still making things work, still making things happen. And so Black women carry this level of innovation that is bar none, just positive, uplifting, and making a way out of no way. So I think that's really, really important to call out there.
I loved that reference. You also got a lot of shout outs in the chat
I
box with
don't have
that.
the chat.
People were very excited about that reference. But I love that. I mean, truly at the end of the day, if you look at any group that has been marginalized and you look at the positivity and the knowledge and the intelligence that's come from it, and so a lot of times the joy, I mean, people will find a way to work through that and really deliver some of the best outcomes.
Yes,
And I think that that's so important to really recognize.
absolutely.
Well, to speak a little bit more specifically towards EVERSANA Intouch, do you know of any groups or things that people can participate in within EVERSANA Intouch if they're members of, a marginalized community, specifically the Black community? I'd love to hear.
Yes, so here we have the Black Professional Network, which I've been helping with, and in addition with Eric Terry and other group members. Thank you guys so much. But I will definitely encourage you guys to join BPN. It is a great group. We try to get together, have very real conversations. And if you just need someone to listen, we let people have the floor. It's really, really great. So I definitely encourage you to join. Also, with other members and other groups, LGBT, women's group, Latinx group, we definitely try to make sure that there's an overlap of understanding within these groups, that where we can all come together, not only to support, but also to help pour into EVERSANA and make it its best that it can be.
Yes, thank you. I love that. And that's very important. It's something that I didn't even know existed as a member of the queer community. I didn't know that it existed. So that's why I wanted to take the time to shout that out, to make sure that people know that we have these platforms available for us here at EVERSANA Intouch.
Absolutely.
To look forward, to end on another note, I want to look forward a little bit to the future. So
Okay.
one, how do you feel about our current moment in time? And then how do you see our progression when it comes to the rights and in a more equitable future?
So right now in our moment in time, we definitely have some political hurdles, I will call them. However, I think we're at a turning point, right? I do feel that we're at, I don't want to say a last hurrah of holding on to the good old days, which actually, when you look back, weren't good old days for everyone. The inequality for minority groups, women even, being able to buy a house after a divorce, coming from difficult circumstances. I think it's just very, very important that we not only recognize that, but our moment in time is, are we going to move back or are we going to move forward? So we're at a point where we need to decide. We decide at the voting booths, we decide with our advocacy, whether that's going out, supporting the groups that you believe in, and just making sure that you pour back resources into the community to make sure that they move forward. So it's really, really important that we recognize our moment in history as it is in this time and in this moment. Where I see us potentially going is in the way that I am optimistic and hopeful, which is we do have we'll never have a level playing field for all. However, if we can get an inch, a centimeter closer, that's progress. It is a slow moving ship. We have a lot of laws, regulations that need to be refined, updated. And so doing that with your local and more so your local offices, when you see something, please, 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 you have a voice. It is ever so present and powerful. Please use it.
I think respect is so key. And I feel like when you talk about the good old days and how they seemed good, I mean, there wasn't respect for everybody. There was only respect for like a certain type of person. And if everybody followed that, then everybody else fell in line, and that was great. Now we need to look towards a future where everybody is respected. And I think that's really what we need to push for sure.
Yes, Michael, I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, how can allies support and promote Black women excellence, Black excellence, all of the above, whether it's in personal, professional lives? I think this is like a good final thing to throw at you with 15 minutes left. But I just want to know, how can everybody else, like, I know you talked about voting and things like that, but any last little bits of advice for us?
Last bits of advice, try to have check-ins. Try to, whether it's a chat, whether it's, just a 5-minute, virtual chat or meeting. I think it's important to continually check the temperature because, when Black women even send their children out, we don't know how they're coming back with a positive experience or a bad experience. So I think just those check-ins would be super, super helpful. Mm-hmm. Also with Women in Black Excellence, if you see potential, try to give them an experience that they either haven't had that could catapult them in a way that isn't necessarily on, hey, this is your next step. Just allowing them those opportunities that they just don't typically have, it would be very, very helpful.
I agree. And also I want to end on this note because Black History Month may just be, identified as February, but it's all year round. Pride Month, Black History Month, Women's History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, all of these things are all year round for a lot of people, and it should be for everybody. So that is something that we need to make sure that we continue to look forward to and continue to bring into our everyday lives. Everybody, please, this is the one time I'll say you can unmute. Give Ashley a round of applause for being such an incredible speaker. This has been really amazing. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Ashley. Thank you.
Ashley. Thank you guys.
Everybody, I will be posting the recording on Teams later. I do apologize about the Zoom trouble. I am sorry that Misty couldn't be here to join us, but please feel free to reach out to Misty if you want to hear any of her backstory. And I just want to thank you all so much for tuning in. It makes me so glad to know that we all are here to support each other.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day, everybody. And Jordan, yes, I can definitely share the recording in a more broader scope. I'm going to write your name down so I remember to reach out to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was so great. And I know the rest of the non-in-touch folks would really appreciate listening if they didn't have a chance to. So that would be so awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, everyone.
Michael and Ashley, I just want to say thank you. You did an amazing job. Amazing job.
Thank you. Thanks, Franco.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Have a good one, everyone. Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks. Bye, Michael.
Matriarch would like to thank you for listening to our podcast. Please visit matriarchmom.com to continue the conversation and join the sisterhood of other legendary Black queens in the making.